Mr. President, I'm going to hand over to Amy from my publisher. I can't believe I'm saying it, my publisher, Luath. Amy.
Thank you. Hello all. So good evening everyone and welcome to the launch of Inside Indyref by Pete Wishart, his first book. So this book's going to take us behind the scenes of the 2014 Scottish independence referendum, a pivotal moment in Scottish political history. With its unique vantage point, Pete captures intensity, excitement and deep political engagement that marked the campaign, offering both a personal and reflective account of it. As we reflect tonight on how the referendum has shaped and continues to influence Scotland's political landscape, this book is a compelling look at one of the most significant events in modern Scottish life. And that's just a short reintroduction to what Pete's going to be discussing, and at the end we'll have some time for some questions from you all. So, Pete?
Thank you, Amy. And thank you all for coming along this evening. I think you could tell I'm quite excited about all this. This is my first book. I never actually thought to get to the situation, position where it's being released and being available. I've actually found the world of book publishing actually more bewildering and Byzantine than the world of politics, but we're just about there and negotiated it. So today the book is officially out and I'm really proud and pleased with this little book, and I really hope that you enjoy the account of the independence referendum. There's no surprises, there's no body found in the study with a lead piping as murder. There's no spoilers. We know we lost. We know exactly the trajectory, the story of all this. So this is just an account of what we did. Now, how we did this is I've always kept diaries. I just always found it something that was quite cathartic, just trying to note down the day's events, whether that was in music or in politics. But when we got to the independence referendum, I just found I was making longer and longer entries, and I felt I should try and capture what was shaping up to be one of the most exciting episodes in Scottish political history. So I was doing longer and longer entries, and I was really enjoying it. Sometimes I was sitting to 1 o'clock in the morning writing everything down. And towards the end of the book, you'll notice it gets that bit faster paced, more things happen, the entries get longer, there's more to comment on, there's more to observe. And it's trying to get all of that down and capture it and keep it there. And what I see this book more than anything else is a chronicle. And I hope it'll stand in the test of time as being able to set out all the things that happened. I pick up the story of the independence referendum in the summer of 2013. It actually kicked off, as we all know, with the signing of the Edinburgh Agreement in the autumn of 2012, when David Cameron and Alex Salmond sat down on that historic day and came up with what was called the Edinburgh Agreement, which gave the powers to ensure that we had an independence referendum that was beyond legal dispute, that was fair, that was going to be openly, equally contested by a yes and no campaign. And that set in train the contest, competition that we had. The first few months, not much happened. It was like the phony war. Nothing actually went on all that much. Campaign teams were getting together. People were getting used to the fact that we wouldn't be having this contest, but there wasn't all that much in the way of grand and dramatic events. It was only in the summer of 2013 that things started to happen. Things started to really kick off. And we entered a period that I think for most people in this room looking around, I know most of you, it was probably the most exciting and dramatic part of our political lives. There was never anything like it before. There was never anything like it that we'll see again in the future. It was days that we were living through that could completely transform and change our nation forever. And it was such a fantastic period. Everybody that was involved in the Yes campaign will have their own account, their own memories, and their own days that we will forever remember about what we went through in that particular contest. It was a fantastic time for all of us. So I hope we managed to get all of this here. I think the other thing to say about the independence referendum in its early days is nothing like this was ever attempted anywhere in a European democracy before, where a nation within the not within the continent of Europe, but within the confines of Europe actually went through something like this. No other nation had done anything like this in Europe. There had been referendums in Quebec, but they were entirely different characters and creatures to what we were doing in Scotland. This was uncharted territory for absolutely everybody. And after it set in place our future politics for the next decade. It defined every political context. It became the centrepiece of every political debate we had. It set in place the contests that were to subsequently follow, and every election that we fought since 2014 have been about the independence referendum. Mainly, will there be another one, or will that mean the end of independence forever? It has set that in place, and I don't think there's ever going back to where we were in terms of the political debate in Scotland. Following the independence referendum, everything changed. So this is my little book, and what I'm going to do is take you through that period. I'm not going to consume all your time, but I just want to try and emphasise some of the particular episodes that happened, some of the main events that were there, and I hope that you might remember them fondly and appreciate some of the things we had. I'm going to sit down because I want to be able to look into this book so I can be able to read some of it out to you too. In my intro, I tried to find what was the birthplace of the independence referendum. Where did it all start? How did we get there? Because we know that we got the Edinburgh Agreement, we know that they got the majority SNP government in 2011. But how did all this start to get in place? How did we get to this point? What was the beginning? And obviously they've been campaigning for independence for 30, 40 years. When Queen's victory started everything in place. But what I say, the birthplace of the independence referendum was a little place in Central Station in Glasgow in an outlet called Subway. And I'll read you, this will be my first little reading from the book. There were a number of factors, sorry, I've already lost my place, I read you. Okay, there. There were a number of factors behind Labour's spectacular collapse in the spring of 2011. Because remember, Labour had a double-digit lead over the SNP going into the 2011 election, only a month before the election was due. But if anywhere could claim to be the birthplace of the independence referendum, it is the unlikely setting of the Subway sandwich outlet in Glasgow's Central Station. It was here the then Scottish Labour leader Ian Gray sought refuge from a bunch of placard-waving protesters intent on stopping him campaigning against SNP cuts to an airport link. In extraordinary scenes, those protesters pursued Ian Gray into the bowels of the property, where Gray was awkwardly forced to confront the protesters in excruciating fashion in front of the TV cameras. After eventually getting out and fleeing in a taxi, he only went on to make the situation 10 times worse by bizarrely comparing this experience to its time in Rwanda and the killing fields of Cambodia. In one swoop, Labour's dramatic 50-point lead over the SNP effectively vanished, and Labour's election campaign was dead. The SNP then went on to win a majority of seats in that election. Now, I'm not claiming that the episode in the Subway was the thing that defined and changed that election, but by God, it's a great way to describe it, isn't it? There should be a plaque on that Subway outlet at Central Station. This is the birthplace of the independence referendum. So we did get a referendum. We won by a majority. David Cameron tried to resist the independence referendum. He made a modest attempt to say it never really happened, knowing fine and well that there was absolutely nothing that he could do. The SNP had a majority, had a legitimate majority on the back of a mandate to secure an independence referendum. And Cameron could do absolutely nothing about that. Once our majority became a conclusion, a referendum became inevitable. It was just a matter of how it was conducted and how it was fought. And then we got the Edinburgh Agreement, and then we got the campaign. But at the start of things, looking at 2013, and I put this at the beginning of my diary, and I said, the next sort of part that I'm going to read out to you, like, prospects weren't particularly good for the Scottish National Party. We had barely got over 30% of the support. We had secured the right to hold an independence referendum, which seemed highly unlikely that we would win. And what I wrote at that point was, Sitting here at the end of June 2013, things are not looking all that encouraging for those of us who support the case for Scottish independence. The No campaign dominate the headlines. Their one task is to sow uncertainty and doubt about the viability of an independent Scotland, and have been singularly successful in pursuing this agenda. There are many questions about how an independent Scotland would operate as chimed with a sceptical Scottish public, unsure or even hostile to the whole independence proposition. And that was what it was like in that period, and I'm sure people will remember as we sat in that campaign, how far we were behind, and how we hadn't really sort of properly mobilised and got the group together to ensure that we would be successful. And then we did start to make progress. We got the campaign, we got the Yes campaign. Nicola Sturgeon was drafted in to lead it, and at that point a real organisational discipline started to kick in. But throughout that summer and early autumn of the independence campaign, again, not all that much happened, and we were all out in Perth High Street, we were all canvassing, we all had our independence teams, but there was nothing that sort of gave any impetus to any of the yes or no. So we were continuing to get beat, not just get beat, but beat quite badly, and there was never any indication that we were going to seek the breakthrough that we got a year later, and things were sort of steady in the opinion polls. It was all leading up to the launch of the white paper, and that was the one thing when it was introduced, was the first thing to change the whole nature of the debate about the independence referendum. And the build up to the white paper was actually something else. We were all looking forward to it. We were all locked out of it, even as a parliamentarian and somebody who actually contributed to quite a few of the chapters of it. I had no idea what was going to be in that white paper. I'd seen it and had the opportunity to have a look at it. I remember John Swinney brandishing a copy at me a few days before it was released, tempting me to have a look, but I thought I'd be the same as everybody else in Scotland. I'll wait my time and I'll look at it at the same time as everybody else did. And I actually couldn't believe my patience in order not to have a look at it at that point. But the white paper came out, and that was the first real thing that we did, that we were able, I think, to introduce the campaign properly to the Scottish people and start to have something that we could promote and get on top of it, something that we could do. What I say about the white paper launch, because again, this was such a dramatic day, I'll never forget it. And I'm just finding out, I'm so used to make parliamentary speeches with my own notes, I'm not all that when it comes to going through books, but I've got it here. And the white paper. Today will be one of the biggest, if not the biggest day in the independence referendum so far. At last, the white paper will be launched. It is due at 10 AM from the Science Centre in Glasgow, and something like 200 international media delegates have been registered. First, though, there was another desperate last-minute preemptive strike from the UK government when they revealed that independence will cost each Scot £1,000. Alistair Carmichael was charged to take this round the radio stations this morning, but nobody was interested, nobody cared. Everybody wanted to go and see the white paper. At the launch, it was the briefest of introductions before questions, and what could only be called a solid performance and business-like performance from Alec and Nicola. Almost understated, Alec seemed to ignore all the questions that were fielded and talk about the paper in the way that he wanted. It went down particularly well, and such was the demand to see the white paper that the Scottish Government website crashed almost immediately. The whole exercise seems to flat-foot the nose, and the response was nothing other predictable and tired sounding. Alistair Darling just sounded angry, whereas our spokespeople sounded positive and encouraging and authoritative. Even with all my doubts about the closed nature of the white paper preparation, I warmed to it immediately. It was well written, well constructed, and it seemed to address all the issues of the independence campaign. It was a very good day for the party and the Yes movement. So the white paper came out, and we were in a situation where we were starting to get on the front foot. Polls were starting to shift, things were going in our favour. Into the new year, we were actually starting to make progress for the first time in the independence campaign, and a lot of us were getting quite excited about it. We're seeing our rise in the poll again and again. Then came fearful February, and that was when the No campaign decided this was a campaign that we had to kill. And they threw absolutely everything at us. For a period of 3 weeks, it was non-stop, it was sustained, and they did everything they could to kill us. And what was the first thing? The Sermon on the Pound. Remember that? George Osborne ruling out the currency arrangements in the currency union. Now, we always knew they would do this. We always knew that at some point during the election campaign, they would rule out a currency union. But they did it really early. This was February. The independence referendum was still something like 7 to 8 months away. And we always thought we'd do it closer to the end as a sort of last thing to say, there's no way this is ever going to happen, so you could forget it, and that would be the last big volley in salvo. But they brought it in early because they saw us closing in the opinion polls, and they felt that they had to respond accordingly, and that's what they did. And I think, even though we knew this was coming, there was something particularly unsettling about George Osborne that morning when he did it. And I want to read just a little bit about that, which I captured hopefully in the book, and I'm looking for it just now. Here we are. There he is, our Chancellor of the Exchequer, all but ruling out a currency union. Even though we knew he'd do this, it still seems to be quite shocking to hear this new escalation. In his speech, he said that it wouldn't work, that it was unreasonable for the rest of the UK to take on this responsibility, and that he couldn't propose this to the rest of the UK. Delivered in his usual expressionless, monotone style, the deadpan delivery just added to the menace. It just came across as ugly and even intimidating. The pound that we thought we all shared with the rest of the UK is not, in fact, ours at all. We would be excluded, and the rest of the UK would now do everything possible to make life as difficult as they could for an independent Scotland. It was a crushing rejection of our case for a currency union, and quite clear-cut and seemingly unequivocal. So from that point onwards, all we heard about was currency. They had set it out, and within the end of the day, what's he called? Danny Alexander and Ed Balls had also joined in this action. All three prospective chancellors at the next election had ruled out the currency union. How would that play out in Scotland was a big question. And I remember, and I'm sure some of my staff were here will also remember that period too. People were actually coming into my office saying that they were previous no voters and were now going to be voting yes because they were not going to be bullied by a Tory Chancellor. The Tories thought we would be telled, and Scotland effectively said to the UK government, we will not be telled. They overplayed their hand. They did it in a way that sort of it was rubbing the Scots' face in it, something that we felt that we shared with the rest of the kingdom wasn't ours, and this wasn't playing out well at all. So the next thing the Noes did was throw the next big salvo into the works, and that was to get their good friend Jean-Manuel Barroso, the leader of the European Union, to go on the MAR programme and tell Scotland that it would not get back into the European Union, that we would be way down the queue and we could forget about any new aspiration of getting back in. And that was all over the news. Within 3 weeks, the big guns, currency in the EU, were out against us, and we had to deal with it. Fearful February, and it was some time. And if we thought we were having a quiet independence referendum, those few weeks changed absolutely everything. The thing is, it didn't work for them. And it didn't work for them for a number of reasons. They felt that we would just bow down to this and they could now move on with the independence referendum effectively won. But it just did not work out for them the way they did. Scotland responded in a way that was really quite positive. And for all in the spring, we started to creep up in the opinion polls month after month, week after week. It got to the point within late April, we were within 4 points of actually being in the lead. And that is what happened. But there was still a long time to go. We still had to get through the summer and through the rest of the spring. And it plateaued, but it's all got quiet again, unusually in that April period. There's a lot of funny things went on, and some of the French stuff I'll sort of pick up on just now. Remember the cyber nats? Remember that this was an invention and creation by the No campaign. We had no friends in the media. There was no newspapers that supported the Yes campaign until the Sunday Herald came out for us in mid-June. No journalist within the Scottish media was an acknowledged Yes supporter at that point. All the media were against us. The BBC tried this impartiality stuff, but we all knew that all of the newsreaders, all the major commentators were absolutely hostile to Scottish independence. Some of them tried to hide it. Some of them, like Andrew Neil, Jeremy Paxman, didn't even try to bother to hide it. They still went on presenting neutral TV programmes, but everybody knew that they were unionists, and they tried to make sure that that was presented properly. So the only thing that we had was independent media that we were able to build and to share. So we were able to direct people to independent media sites, and a lot of them sort of emerged, developed a quite important personality of their own. And the other thing that we had, which we dominated on, was social media. Social media was really important for us. It was a way for us to share information, keep in contact, make sure people were kept up to date about developments in the independence campaign. So they had to close that down. They had all the mainstream media, they had all the general commentators and other newspapers. What we had was this space on the internet, whether that be digital sites or whether that be social media. So they invented the cybernet. We were all people who sat up all night, probably drinking some flat lager in their underpants, looking for some sort of unionist to bully and to harass. And this is the way it was presented, because they had to close that down, and they had to try and ensure that that opportunity we had for building our case was denied to us. So this became a real feature, and there were so many things done about cyber nats all the way through. Some of our people behaved appallingly, and we can't excuse that. A lot of our energy, particularly for parliamentarians, was spent, like going for TV canvas, trying to talk away the latest abuse that was given to somebody, whether that be J.K. Rowling or Claire Lally or whoever it was. So a lot of our energy was taken out that unnecessarily because of some of the way that people did behave, and there was an issue there, but it was nothing compared to how they tried to build this case. And the other thing they did was the cultural wars, the love bombing. And I will never forget getting a letter from Mick Jagger through my post telling me that I should be supporting the union because Mick thinks it's a really good idea and he doesn't want it to go, and he feels that there'd be something lacking in the United Kingdom if Scotland wasn't there. But the funniest thing ever was, I used to go to the Brits, and I think a few of you might know that, and every year I go to the Brits, but there was something that happened that year that was quite extraordinary, quite funny. And I'll read that out to you because it was one of my favourite little episodes during the independence referendum, and it was just something that I'll never ever forget. Absolutely hilarious. And there was the hashtag the Brits, practically everything was a guest crackers on that. This because junk and overly dancing. Ziggy played Stranraer. And my absolute favourite, the man who fell to Perth. Fantastic stuff, and really funny. Got no idea what possessed Bowie to get involved in Scottish independence, but it turned out to be really amusing. So that was the sort of stuff that was going on, the love bombing, trying to enlist celebrities, stuff around the cybernets, the debate that was raging on social media, and it began to be an ever feature of everybody's daily discourse and conversations that people were having. Things changed again. The Commonwealth Games, nobody acknowledges the importance of the Commonwealth Games on the independence referendum. It was so important, and what it did, because Scotland had such success in hosting the event, as well as doing well on the track and field with so many Scottish athletes winning so many medals, it changed dramatically the whole atmosphere and culture of the independence referendum. A feel-good factor crept in. And we noticed it when we were out campaigning and canvassing in Perth, that people would come to us with a changed mood and attitude towards what Scotland could be and what Scotland could become. They saw all these fantastic Scottish athletes doing really well. And I think what we were trying to say to them, if we could do well as sporting success at this, why can't we do well as a nation? And I think this was starting to reach through, and this was all happening. But then something even worse happened. The first debate, and I don't know if anybody will remember it. And God knows what was wrong with Alex having that night. But it took us a week to even start to recover from the disaster of that first debate. And I think of all the things that went wrong in the independence referendum from our side, that was the thing that took the energy out of our campaign at just the wrong time. Now, I'm going to read out something, and it's pretty critical of our First Minister because what happened, but what I will acknowledge is when Alec got back to Kelvin Grove and to the BBC debate, he trounced Darling, and he actually helped us get back on the way once again. But there's no getting away from the impact that this had on the campaign at that point, just after the success of the Commonwealth Games and the type of impetus that we're building. And to the debate, and it's an absolute nightmare. You could tell it was going to be bad with the uncharacteristic nervousness of the First Minister, as unusual and disturbing stumbles in his first few contributions. But he'll get better, right? It was also this case that Darling's first few remarks were also not what would be described as cultured and polished. But where Darling settled down into expected assured mediocrity, Alec just could not rouse himself. This was bad. We got through the first section all right without any prisoners taken. They then got down to the cross-examination where they got the opportunity to question each other without moderation. And suddenly Darling's making sustained hits with a feeble response from Alec on currency. Alec was even getting booed from the audience. This was hurting, and all Alec could do was to repeat what Darling had said about currency union from a year ago, which just made it sound churlish. Then Alec got the chance to question Darling, and the first question was something about what side of the road do we drive on, and other nonsense about alien invasion. What on earth was this? Darling, looking almost relieved at the line of questioning, exhaled a sigh of relief with a, "Is that it?" Alec then lost the cross-examination session and therefore the debate. The exit poll that's always taken after this was a disaster for us. It was something that we had to win and something that went down really badly. And it did take us a long time to get there. Alec did correct that, obviously, with the second debate. But had you been able to continue with that impetus, I feel that we might just have been able to build a momentum that had become irresistible. And it was a bad moment for all of us. I've never been out canvassing with some of you that trying to deliver all of that. But it went on, and for some reason, we found that we were recovering in the polls once again, that somehow we sustained that. We got to the second debate, and that seemed to be good. Things seemed to be getting back into play. We seemed to be competitive again. And I wrote something about the resilience of the debate, which, you know, we were able to withstand all sorts of attacks. We were still there, right at their heels, at the point of winning and coming across and doing it. Then we had Jim Murphy, remember? The tour with Jim Murphy, the 50 Streaks in 50 Days, and how it all came to a sad end with an egg in Kirkcaldy, you know, more Keystone Cops and gunfight at the OK Corral. And for the first time ever, I think with some reasonable legitimacy, the Nose could say something about the bullying that they were receiving and some of the nastiness of the campaign in the shape of an egg. So that grumbled on for days and days. But the thing I think that changed it all for us at that period and how we managed to start to get back in the polls is we started to be negative about stuff. And the thing that we did that with was with the NHS and our agenda at that point about NHS privatisation and the risks that was for the NHS in Scotland. That really started up. There was actually more money going into the NHS in England, which gave us better bad consequences. But for some reason, it worked. And we knew it worked because the howls of protests from the unionists, colleagues in the Scottish Parliament debated it and they hated it. And they kept on coming back saying there was nothing in there. So we knew we were onto something. That was the emergence of people like Philippa Whitford. And Philippa did a fantastic amount of work during that. She was at endless yes meetings and became an ever-present in the campaign at that point. And then it happened. We took the lead. It was just quite incredible. That Sunday, 2 weeks out from the independence referendum itself, we went ahead. It's the last reading I'll do for you. That's the day that we took the lead in the polls. It's good. So many bits of paper here. Just negotiating the way through it. It's only gone and happened. This morning we have the first credible opinion poll showing yes ahead. This is a massive moment and something we've all been praying for, if not to the Indyref gods for. It's a small lead, but a massive statement. If the referendum was to be held today, yes would win. All over Scotland, people involved in either campaign will be reading and rereading this dramatic twist in the Indyref saga. But everybody is excited and celebrating the message to keep focused and keep our feet firmly on the ground. Whatever the detail of the poll, it's just a poll, retweeted Nicola Sturgeon. It's a vote on 89 that counts, so let's redouble our efforts and stay focused. Since the last debate, we've noted a change in the campaign, a growing intensity in the yes vote, a new confidence and fortifying of those who support independence. The yes case is beginning to spread like wildfire amongst communities everywhere in Scotland through conversations with whole UKers of yes enthusiasts amongst the ordinary, predominantly working people of Scotland. This has gone largely unnoticed and undetected by the media, but they're seeing it building bit by bit to the point where it's spilling out and overflowing. This is a campaign that now belongs to the communities and the people of Scotland and has assumed a personality of its own. So we were winning, and for the first time in this campaign, but then it became apparent that maybe we peaked too early. And this is something that Alec and Nicola always say about getting in at this point. It gave the Noes an opportunity to recover, to represent themselves, to get on the front foot. And that's exactly what they did. I remember going down to Westminster the Monday after that poll, and it was utterly spooked. The place was, they're all asking me questions. Are we really going to lose this? And yeah, I think we might actually. We had successive point of order just to wind them up, asking if there was going to be a statement about more powers and stuff. You could tell the unease. My phone didn't stop. Like from Bits Republic journalists wanting a briefing in my take. We cancelled Prime Minister's questions that week. They all came up to Scotland. I actually had a Prime Minister's question that week. I didn't even have a camera in front of me. I had to ask William Hague a question. But they all were up, and you could tell the panic that had set in. And of course, what did we get after that? The one thing that changed it back decisively in their favour, the vow. The vow came out the Tuesday before the independence referendum. It was actually supposed to come out on a Monday. The only reason it didn't come out on a Monday was because Perth Lord David Haines had been brutally murdered by IS jihadists in Iraq. And that was the reason it didn't come out on a Monday. They wanted the full 3 days. But it probably worked even better for them when it came out on Tuesday because there was no chance for us to respond. This promise of more powers, we had owned the change agenda all the way through the independence referendum campaign. At long last, those had recognised they were going to have to offer a change of their own. And it was a vow that they drew up. We knew immediately we saw that this was a problem and that this was something that we had no time to respond to. And I think it was probably decisive in that last week to get them over the line. I remember speaking to colleagues and everybody felt the same. I went to the paper shop in Craigie to try and get a copy of the Daily Record. I couldn't get one. I couldn't get one in any paper shop. People were buying that paper and reading it. Then, of course, to the independence referendum campaign day itself. And it was all kicked off beautifully in Perth. We all went to the concert hall the night before. Alec and Nicola, Elaine C. Smith, we were all there. We all still believed and hoped that we could win it. I think most of us sort of felt that it was maybe just a little bit beyond us at that point because of all the things that happened, but we're still hopeful, we're still expectant, and there's still a chance that we could do this. And then the day itself, everybody voted. I remember going back to my office in Perth about tea time for the crucial, critical, get out the vote exercise that you do at that point. To be told there's no point, everybody's voted. And I looked at the canvas sheets, everybody had. Everybody had been out to vote, not just out to vote early. There was nobody left to knock up at the tea time session. and there was going to be a massive turnout. As it was, 87.6% of our fellow Scots voted that day. At Bell Sports Centre, we were all gathered, and we've got it all in here, and I hope you have a look at this. And we knew when that first declaration came in from Clackmannan that it wasn't going to happen. We all tried to sort of pretend it might get a bit better, it might change, and for a glorious moment, it did. 3 results: Dundee, Eastern Bartonshire, and North Lanarkshire came in, and we were ahead. But then it got worse, and it got worse. We held on to the fact that maybe Glasgow could do it for. We're seeing great things from Glasgow. My colleague would tell me this is going to go really well. It did go really well in Glasgow. There was a massive vote for yes, but not enough. Then, of course, it came in after the result from Highland, and we had won, and that was it. Utterly bereft, I think is the way to describe that painful feeling that we had after all that effort, giving so much energy and commitment to it. And all of us, I think, felt that morning, and the last thing that we wanted to do was to talk about what had gone on. But then something remarkable happened, didn't it? Like, we didn't give up. We continued to fight. We didn't know exactly what was going to happen. Would it be like 1979 and the whole energy would get taken out and that would be it? Or would something else happen? And something else did happen. And I remember John Swinney and I hosted a meeting just next door in the Salutation. And you couldn't move. People wanted to come up to talk about how much we were still committed to this campaign. There's another conversation about what happened since then, and opportunities missed, and what we could possibly have done. We are marking the 10 years from the independence referendum today, hoping that we learn lessons about the solidarity, the excitement, the enthusiasm that was there. We're in a different condition now. Some days described the movement, I think, as fractious. Wasn't it? I think we could describe it living through not really period where it's got no clear way forward for us, something I'll never forget. Independence, how we secure it, get to the sharing was great. And I've got my own views about what I think happened. Thank you, you're all together. If anybody we're here for we've got 10 minutes for Q&As before we start to wind up for tonight, but more than happy if I can answer your questions. I know right now everybody's got their own view and perspective about how things happen, but if anything in particular you want to ask about, what I said with the book, I'm more than happy to try to questions, please.
Yes, and from your point of view, being a Westminster politician, what exactly is Westminster? Why are they so against independence?
There's a number of reasons why Westminster doesn't want Scotland to get independence, but the main ones is what it does to its sense of self, I think. And I think that was it. One person is able to describe that, and I recognise him in his book as David Cameron. I thought David Cameron was the best advocate for the no case, and he talked about that. There was a sense for them, and I really believe this is the case for them, that there is something about the United Kingdom that's deep-rooted in their psyche. And it's, people say it's about resources. It might be. I don't know, would they survive without Scottish oil? Probably. Is it something they really need? Possibly. But it's this idea for them that there's a unity and sense of what they're about historically and culturally, and being the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. They will fight to death to retain that. Westminster will never make this easy for us. They had to give us a referendum back in 2014 because we won such a significant victory for the first time. They're never going to make it easy again, and this is what we're up against. Because they know next time round, they might not get away with it. We will probably beat them if we get an opportunity to decide the future again. And this is why they're digging in the way that they are, and why they're saying no all the time. Is there any perspective of independence referendum in the future? Yes.
Is referendum the way to go forward?
I think we've exhausted the referendum route. This is just my personal view. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody or any part of the party. I actually believe that had we got a majority in 2021, we would have caved. I really believe that. And why I say that is there was enough Westminster MPs that were telling me that. And it was the one thing that they feared was replicating the conditions the first referendum back in 2014, and we came damn close. We were one seat short, and we tried to make it something about the arrangement with the Greens, but for Westminster that didn't work for them. It was always about the Scottish National Party. The Scottish National Party to Westminster is the only vehicle and route they accept as a presentation of the independent support. So we didn't get that, and I think having not secured that, we tried to obviously go to the Supreme Court and all this sort of thing just to see if there was an opportunity for. I struggle to think there's a referendum route now to Scottish independence. And the one thing I support just now, and I'm not going to offer an opinion about how we actually get able to do that. I listened to Keith Brown at our conference, and he was spot on. We need to get a convention together. We need to bring back the independence family once more. A lot of us don't get on with each other. A lot of us don't like each other very much, but we've got to do it. And more than that, what that will offer is for us to engage meaningfully with Civic Scotland, which is, I think, what we need to do. So I think we have to look at these. I want to bring the imagination and the views of everybody together in a place and a space that we can have that conversation, discussion. That's why I think the convention is really, really important. Time for another couple of questions, if anybody's. Yes, well, take these three, then we'll have to call it for you. Jackie.
You talked in your reading about the point where the culture and nature of the interaction between the British state and the SNP and the campaign changed. Was that anticipated? Was there an expectation that they would start to play hard? Or was there an expectation that this might be something that could be negotiated?
I think we started out and that we would do this amicably, that we would do this in a relationship, because we all knew that we'd have to live with each other depending upon the result. And I think we naively presumed that they would start to take the view that had we won, they would have to have a good relationship with us. But as they became more concerned about the possibility of losing, they hardened up. The first thing they did, and remember that this I think was the key change in their mindset, they sacked the Scottish Secretary. There was a guy called Michael Moore, a guy that could be nicer. And Michael was one of these people who went about his business trying to make people like him and to try and engage positively. They sacked him and replaced him with a buffoon called Alistair Carmichael, who was just this blubbering, he had this conceit of himself. And I think the most satisfying thing for me during the independence referendum was when Nicola absolutely trounced him in a debate, and he did the one thing you never do in a debate, which was to appeal to the moderator, in this case the lovely Rona Dougal, for help. And that was, help me Rona, but Nicola was taking strips of him, and nobody could be more worthy and deserving of that. But that was the first thing they did, and I think when we saw them replacing him, then we got to, obviously, the sterling and the pound, and that was where it became abundantly clear that the only thing that mattered to them was victory, and they couldn't care all that much about the future relationships with Scotland. That was something they would work on after the referendum, but they were clear to burn bridges in the lead up to that point. So I think that was the switch that changed, and they did that because they saw us making advances in the late winter and early spring in 2014, and they had to address it. I think it was the gentleman there, then Alan, and we're going to have to leave it at that.
Now you're a published author.
Well, funny you should ask. At some point I will put out a memoir, I think. And the thing, it's really funny because I've got other things I want to do in terms of writing. But there are a couple of these sessions now, and a fantastic session with Leslie Riddick at the SNP conference. And I think what I want to review and look at, and I've got some source material to work on, is the space between the independence referendum and the point we are now. I don't think that's been adequately explored and looked at, and I think we need to do better, just in that reflective period and the opportunities that were maybe lost in some of the things that we could have done to progress independence. So we're sort of interested in looking at all that. But I've got a hell of a lot of responsibilities at Westminster that for some reason made me deputy leader. God knows what they're thinking about. So I've got that as well as my other responsibilities, but that would be something I'd like to address. And the last question always goes to Alan Murphy.
Always.
Well, nearly always.
I'm okay. The Scottish referendum campaign was closely watched all over the world, probably more so than we realised at the time. And the summer of 2014, when the campaign was reaching its peak, we had a holiday in the south of France with a French friend, in the French Pyrenees actually, in the French Basque country. We were staying halfway up a mountain in a French B&B. The hosts were very, very friendly. They told us we were the first ever Scottish customers. And they had loads of questions about our referendum campaign and would we win and would Scotland become independent. There were Basque nationalists. They wanted independence from France and from Spain. They were very, very keen, and they'd been following our independence campaign day after day after day. They believed that if we won independence, it would give a great advance to Basque nationalism and similar campaigns in other places like Catalonia. And I really think we underrated at the time what a big impact our work was having in many parts of the world.
I think that's such an important point, and well made as always from Alan. I mean, there's a section in this book where I went to Catalonia, where at that point we had Common Cause, and this was an advance of their independence referendum. At that point, it was pretty much a settled will that Catalans wanted independence. They were, of course, hamstrung by the Spanish Constitution, which disallows them the opportunity to have any independence referendum at any time. But you're right, I remember I spoke in what was called the Economic Forum, and I can't remember, Silesia in Poland. It was like the Davos of the East, it was called. And it was people from all sorts of former Soviet states and places within Russia that were seeking independence. And I found myself in this panel, like with a Catalan, and somebody from Transnistria, which I didn't even know at that point, and for some reason a Democratic Unionist, and it was mobbed, and it was politicians from all over Europe at this thing. And what I did, I spoke about our independence referendum and how it was different from any other independence campaign in the post-Soviet era. It's nothing to do with nationality, very little to do with culture. All we wanted to do was to run our country because we believed that the people who would work here would make a better job of anybody else. We're a culturally secure nation. We don't need to talk about ourselves in the way that others. We don't need to prove ourselves in terms of what we offer the rest of the world. We know what we do. We know how good we are at it, and we've got a conceit of ourselves when it comes to this. And what our movement is different about was the civic nature of it. And like I said something, maybe not so complimentary about Alan. A lot of that was on Alex Salmond and the work that he did with Neil McCormick and Alan McCartney, building up this idea of a civic nationalism. Nobody had seen this before. It had nothing to do with nationalism or culture. It was a positively progressive movement, and we did it, and we should have won. Because it would have been a great example, you're right, to all the other independence movements that are around us now, and they maybe could have taken an example from this. I've been to Quebec, I've been to Catalonia. The way we did it was entirely different to them, and it was better than the way that they did it, and had better values, and the case was put much more articulately. And I really hope if we do get this again, that we do it even better next time round. Right, folks. A couple of things I'm going to ask from you, if that's all right. Because this is such a great audience, I want you in a photo if I could get that. Is that all right? Yeah, maybe holding up a couple of books. And I want, if people who want to buy them, please. Waterstones are here tonight providing the books, and thank you, Waterstones, for all the work you've done to help us. I'll sign any number of books that you want. I'm quite happy to do that, and of course I'd like to do it. And I also want to thank Luath and to Amy for coming through tonight. Luath have been the publishers and I've been doing a fantastic job of turning it around for the SNP conference and getting it out in advance of the independence anniversary. It's 10 years, folks, and lots going on next week. I'm going down to Scottish Parliament to Believe in Scotland rally. I think there's a show and film, The Nationals. I've written a couple of pieces for The National, for the next sort of few days. We've got lots going on around the independence referendum. Let's mark it positively. Let's let them know that we've not forgotten, we've not given up, and we're still here, and we're still coming back, and we're not going to rest until we're an independent nation. So I think around all the events around the 10 years, we've got an opportunity to reassert that and make sure that's restated. But thanks for coming along this evening. It's been great speaking to you. Thank you for the questions and listening so patiently. And good evening, but please stay for a photo. Yeah, brilliant. Cheers.